Welcome to part 2 of my beginner Unreal Engine series. What we're going to be looking at in this video is just the basic controls of Unreal Engine. We're going to just go over some of the common hotkeys, and I'm just going to tell you a basic idea of where everything is located inside of the interface, because it can be a little bit daunting with all of the features that are available. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you learned something. So if you followed the first tutorial correctly, you should be able to get to this launcher screen here. Once you are at the launcher, you can either just hit the button launch here, or you can go to the library and launch the version of Unreal Engine that you want to use. So if I hit launch here, just give it a moment to boot up. And then I'm going to make a brand new file that we can just go in and play around with some things. So I'm going to click Games, Next. For this one, I guess it doesn't really matter. I'll do first person. Next. Now, blueprints is the most important one to have on for this. Also, I guess the starter content is great for this as well. But for now, these other ones are not really a big deal. So I'll call this tut2 practice. Create the project. And now we should be able to boot up our game. So first things first, if you want to just get more comfortable with moving around, if you hold the left mouse button and move forward, your character will move forward. You can also move it left and right to kind of look around, but it's not quite just looking around because you're actually moving the entire character. If you hold the right mouse button, then you will just look around. So wherever your mouse moves, that's where your character is going to look. If you hold the middle mouse button in, the camera will pan. So I really like using this one because I find it's very easy to just maneuver wherever you need to go. And you can also use, well, if you actually hit play mode here, so this will go into your actual game and you can test it. W, S, A, and D all work. Like that's a fairly common set of hotkeys used for movement inside of video games. So WASD works in this mode. If you hit left click, you'll shoot the gun. And that's all just, that works for this project, but you can change the controls all you want to fit whatever project you are using. I just kind of wanted to go through that and show you how that works. Another control that is fairly common is if you scroll up and down on the mouse wheel, you'll zoom in and out. So I believe when you do this though, it is actually moving the camera. So it's not just like the camera stays in one position and you're moving towards it. Like it's getting a different focal length. I think you are actually moving the camera in this situation. But yeah, zoom in and out, great to have. If you want to transform an object, so you want to move it, rotate it, or scale it, the buttons are W. So as you can see right now, when we have this box selected, this is the blue axis, the red axis, the green axis. So X, Y, and Z. Now, if I drag this up, the box will move. And watch what happens with the gizmo here when I hit E. So as you can see, now we have a rotate gizmo. So if I want to take this, spin it on its X axis, Y axis, X axis here. And then we can hit R, and now we have a scale gizmo. So we can also come back over to here. We want to change the rotation to 0, 0, and then maybe we'll just change this back to 0. Now, as you can see, everything kind of flattens out because these are all of this is the transform information for this particular object. And if we want to snap it back down to the ground, all we have to do is hit end. So that's with the insert home, page up, delete, end, page down. As I said, you can bring it up, drop it back down. This is a really helpful one to have because it just helps you quickly place everything. I really like using that. Another great hotkey, if you are working in a large scene and you want to focus in on this particular area, just hit the F button. It'll zoom in on that object and then you can do whatever you need to do with it. And it'll just get you up close and in a better workspace. Like most softwares, it actually does have a undo button. So if you hit Control Z, as you can see, we're going to be going back and it'll fix some of the problems you had there. So if you accidentally move something or you messed up, you can just hit Control Z and undo that, and then everything should be fine. I don't know. I find with some softwares, if you do a lot of complex things, it can get messed up. I haven't run into that issue with Unreal Engine because nothing I've done is insanely difficult for the engine to, I guess, fix, but that is just worth mentioning. Another quick little tip that's great for organization. If we look over here, this is our world outliner. So this is where all the objects are located. So as you can see, if I start clicking these cubes, they'll actually highlight because they're all in here. So let's say we didn't want it to just be editor cube. We can hit F2 and we can call this Greg cube. Just call this other cube. So as you can see, we've actually named these, so it might be a little bit easier when you're clicking around here going, oh, I need that specific cube. Then F2 is going to let you just automatically rename it in the outliner here. This is a great tool to use, and it's, you know, people can often just dump all their assets in here, but I do think it's really important to keep this organized so that if you have a large scene, you can just work through things and you know exactly where everything is located, and it just helps for overall organization. How would we select all objects? This is one that I think it's good to know, but I have really never used it because I find that it's rare that you want to grab everything unless you want to like shift a level up, but just hit Control A. And then as you can see, everything gets selected. The reason why this camera popped up here is because we actually selected this object. So again, Control A is how you select all inside of a level. One that I find really useful as well is the Control B button. So what this is going to do is it's actually going to find the selected object in the asset browser. So Control B, watch down here, or the content browser, sorry, watch down here. Now we can find that. And what's so cool about the content browser is that it will organize everything. So you can come in here and you can have your imported materials. You can have your imported models. Everything is separated where they need to be. And you can also find the starter content in here. So at the beginning of the video, I had said that we wanted to have the starter content selected on. And I think by default it is, so you should be okay. And while inside of here, you can come and drop these walls in. So just these pre-built sort of architectural assets. I personally don't really like using these. I find that they're a little too basic for just the walls and things like that. But when you're just doing these quick tutorials or just quick examples, they're really not that bad. So if you just want to do some tests with quick materials, these are set up and they're ready to go. It's also great just to have these little props, I guess. Like as I said, I only really use these when I'm testing things. I think that's kind of the limit of their ability. So these aren't really high quality assets, but they are functional assets, which is really nice. And we will be using these more inside of the tutorials just because, as I said, they function very well. We did touch on this when we were looking at some of the cubes, but something that is pretty cool too is over here in the details, this will give you all of the information about individual assets. So if we click on this particular table here, then we can see right here. So this is the static mesh. So this is like the actual physical model itself. And then right here, the materials, so element 0. So that means that this is the first element. So there's only one element in here. You will notice this with Unreal Engine. And if you're not a coder, this might seem a little weird at first, but in computer code, the first number typically is actually 0. It doesn't start at 1 because 0 itself is a number. So an array would go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's how the elements are listed. So here, that's why it's saying element 0 is because that's actually the first texture. But in this case, it's the only texture. If there was a second texture in here, it would be element 1. So we're not going to get too far into that. I'll explain it in future tutorials. I just kind of wanted to say that. If you did also need to do something with the static mesh, like you need to adjust it, you can double tap this, and this is like the edit mode. So you can come in here and just change some of the information. If there's multiple instances of this object, changing it in here will change all of them. And we also have the material here. So this is a little bit more complicated than it needs to be, but yeah, I mean, it's not that difficult. It just would seem pretty difficult if you're just starting off. So don't worry about this. I just wanted to show you that you can click on an object, you can click on the material, and then you can get inside of its material properties. Now, mind you, if this rock slate was connected to another model and you change that material, they're all going to change. So there's only one material, but you can give it to separate objects. And just a quick note on that as well. So over here, I was clicking right here. If you can go to this magnifying glass, click on it, you'll find it in the asset browser. Click on this, you'll find it in the asset browser. And then once you're in here, you can actually double tap on the thumbnails to get to the same screen as over here. So clicking these two places are going to bring you to the same area. If you want some just primitives to throw in your scene and start doing some things with, over here is the place actors. So this is empty actors. These are ones you don't have to worry about too much right now, but this is pretty standard. So we have a cube, we have a sphere, cylinder, that kind of stuff. And you can throw some materials on them. And that's just, it's just like if you need certain things, like if you're making like a pinball game, you need, you know, a little ball, then it's ready to go. There's you know, you probably shouldn't do too much modeling inside of Unreal Engine. I don't think anyone really does it that much. Typically, something like Blender or 3ds Max are the best softwares to use. But for ArchViz, you're probably going to be bringing in a large scene and then just playing around with it in there. So again, this is something you probably don't have to worry too much, but I wanted to cover all of the bases. Going a little bit further into this as well, we also have light. So directional light is the sun. A point light is a light bulb, which means it's going to shoot light off in all directions. A spotlight is what you would see kind of like on a stage where it's a very strong light pointed in a cone direction. A rectangle light is an area light. So you can twist this down and then you're going to get it. So if you kind of push this right against like a ceiling in ArchViz, it's going to illuminate all the walls all the way down, that kind of thing. And then skylight is another one. So this is one we don't have to get into too much right now, but it can really affect the scene. And that is actually the tool that you're going to use to bring in HDRIs into the software. So cinematic we don't need to worry about right now. Visual effects. Post-process is important, but this is how you would get all of the ray tracing inside of one of your scenes. But again, we don't need to worry about this too much because I'm going to be making an entire video about it. I just kind of want to show you where that is. Inside of the visual effects, you also have the sphere reflection and the box reflection, planar reflection, and that should pretty much cover all of that. For geometry, again, these are just basic, you know, cubes, cylinders, except these ones are a little bit different because you can use them as like booleans and edit them together. So these are kind of like editable geometry, whereas these basic ones are meant to just be dropped in and used as a cube. The volumes, there's quite a few in here, but the ones that are important, and again, I'm going to be going over entire videos for this. I'm just showing you where it is right now. So the light mass importance, this is really important for lighting interior scenes or lighting up your video game. It's a very powerful tool. You also have again, the post-process volume, so that's in there again. And you also have a trigger volume, which is something that you can just activate by going into. And the blocking volume, so if you hit play on that the blocking volume, you actually can't get through it because I just put that right in front of the character. Obviously, you can walk around it. So that's great for just doing simple collision on walls and things like that, because the Unreal Engine can calculate the collision, but it's actually much more complex in a lot of cases, and it costs more. So I find it's easier just to drop in the blocking volume, and that works as your floor, walls, whatever. That's definitely what I like to do the most. One last thing I wanted to mention that was inside of the basic that I didn't talk about. So you have a box trigger and also a sphere trigger. So works basically the exact same way as the trigger volume. Just wanted to throw that out there. We will be using these in just a couple tutorials from now, so you definitely want to know where those are. The next thing I want to look at are the viewing modes that you can look at the viewport with. So this one right now is lit, so we have lighting affecting the scene, you know, the sun, anything else we dropped in here. But if we go unlit, what you're effectively seeing is just the raw texture. So this way you can kind of see where everything is, but it's not calculating any of the lighting. We have the brush wireframe, so you can see how dense an object is, you know, if it's tessellated correctly or if it's just too heavy and you maybe need to reduce it in another software. But it's good just to be able to have this view to go in and say, like, you know, why is this displacement not working? You realize that it's not actually, has no geometry to displace. So that's good. You also have lighting only. So this is kind of like a styrofoam mode. And this will just let you look at something and say, okay, great, this is where the lighting is affecting. I'm not going to worry about the materials now. We're just going to look at how the lighting is affected in all the scenes. Another one that's kind of cool is player collision. Player collision here just lets you take a look at something and say, like, okay, what can the player collide with? As we can see, there was a box right in front of us. And with these ones too, you can't walk through them. And you can see that in the collisions here. Yeah, just another little way of looking at it. Having all these viewports to look at is just helping you kind of debug something if you run into a little issue, and it's really good to know where those are. The last two things that I want to show you are what we are going to be looking at first thing in the next episode. So if you want to create an object or a blueprint or a widget, so a blueprint is, it's Unreal Engine's way of taking maybe an asset and then adding a little bit of a script onto it. So maybe a door could be a blueprint. You would have a skeletal mesh or just a static mesh of a door. And then you can have it so that if the player walks up and hits a button, the door will open. So even though it is just technically a model, Unreal Engine has made it so it's an interactive model. And that's kind of how blueprints work. They go much deeper than that, but I guess the too long don't read is that's kind of how it works. And just to find the level blueprint, which is kind of like the general blueprint we are going to be using in our first tutorials, it's just up here. So you go blueprints, open level blueprint, and then we're going to mess around with some stuff in the next video. But the one other thing I wanted to show you is the widget. So the widget is a graphical interface where the player can interact with the game or the game can interact with the player. And when you often see videos of people using material changes inside of ArchViz, they're using widgets to do that. So it's a very powerful tool once you get the hang of it. If you want to make one, you just come down here, widget blueprint. I'm going to leave that here though. I think I went through quite a few little hotkeys and concepts. So I am going to be getting much deeper into this, but I figured that if you watch this, you'll have at least a general idea of where some of the things are in Unreal Engine, some of the hotkeys, and maybe just have a little bit better understanding. But as I said, if you're confused on anything, don't worry about it. I'm going to make this all very clear in the coming tutorials, so I hope you'll join me for them. I'll see you there, guys.